So we all know that Scrum has 3 roles, but who's responsible for doing what? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I like that.
So Duncan, tell us about the 3 roles.
So we all know that there's 3 roles within the Scrum team: the Scrum Master, the Product Owner, and the Development team. But there's still quite a lot of misunderstanding about exactly who is responsible for doing what in various circumstances. So let's just go through some examples. So for example, who do we think is responsible for running the daily Scrum?
This is fairly clear cut. The daily Scrum is by the development team for the development team, their opportunity to inspect and adapt their progress towards the sprint goal. What I often see though is Scrum Masters like to run the daily Scrum.
And Scrum Masters, as you say, it makes them feel useful, makes them feel involved to be running that, but it's really not their responsibility. And that's what we're talking about in this video. Whose responsibility is it?
Who's responsible and who's accountable for this stuff happening in the best way possible? Okay, so that's the daily Scrum, but Duncan, who's responsible for ensuring the team understand how to use Scrum at all?
Yep, so this is vanilla Scrum. The Scrum Master is responsible for ensuring that the team not only understands Scrum, but they're working within the confines, within the boundaries of the Scrum framework. I think a question that a lot of Scrum Masters don't think about is who's responsible for ensuring the organization is using Scrum correctly.
And who do we think that is?
Still the Scrum Master.
Still the Scrum Master. The answer is the same.
Yeah.
What's important, what we're talking about here is where the buck stops. If the team aren't understanding Scrum and aren't enacting it properly, the buck stops at the Scrum Master. But that doesn't mean that everyone else in the team is free from responsibility or free from accountability. It's the whole team's responsibility to understand Scrum and enact it.
Absolutely. We've all got our own personal responsibility for working within the framework to the best of our ability. But ultimately, it comes down to the Scrum Master for ensuring that the team and the organization understand what Scrum is and how they should be using it. Again.
Sorry.
So we often hear that the Scrum Master provides value in 2 main ways: facilitating events and removing impediments. I've kind of answered your question there. Just it's the easy ones which trip you up.
Okay, come on. Focus, team. Who's responsible for ensuring the team focus, Duncan?
So one of the advantages of Scrum is that it drives the Scrum team to continuously improve. But who's actually responsible for ensuring that that continuous improvement takes place?
The whole goal of Scrum is this continuous improvement. But is there one role that's responsible for continuous improvement? I'm not sure that sits with just one role. I think that's the accountability of the Scrum team. The product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master can all improve in their own roles continuously, and that's going to add to the value, ideally, of the product that they're delivering. So I'm kind of thinking continuous improvement is the accountability of the whole team.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an ambiguous question, isn't it? I think the development team are ultimately responsible for ensuring that they continuously improve their technical practices. And the product owner is ultimately responsible for that continuous improvement of the plan for the product. But then the Scrum Master, well, he or she is going to be responsible for ensuring that the organization is continuously improving in their adoption of Scrum. So that's the long answer. The short answer is yes, the Scrum team in different ways.
So let's imagine a scenario where the teams simply aren't recognizing that it's their accountability to improve. That probably sits on the shoulders of the Scrum Master, but the nature of each of the individual improvements is with each team member.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, Dunk, easy one. Let's keep it simple. Who's responsible for deciding what the team work on?
For deciding what the team work on, well, it's not quite as easy as you think.
Not easy?
No, I know. The product owner is responsible for prioritizing the work, but the development team are responsible for how that gets done and how much can be done within a sprint. So in terms of who's responsible for deciding what can get done in the next sprint, that falls to two roles. That's the product owner and the development team working together, collaborating on what the product owner wants done and what the development team think they can get done within that sprint.
So we're saying the product owner focuses on the what to build and the development team focus on how to build it.
If you want to be clear and precise, yeah, you could say that.
So naturally then, I guess, if the product owner is deciding what to build, the product owner also gets to decide who builds it, right? They allocate tasks to the team.
No one tells the development team how to do their work.
Not even the product owner?
Not even the product owner, not even the Scrum Master.
Gold.
So say things aren't working, big problems. Who is responsible for pointing out these elephants in the room?
By the book, obviously, this is bread and butter Scrum Master, but it's a bit more subtle than that, I think. The whole team is responsible for removing impediments. The Scrum Master can remove impediments perhaps the team can't solve themselves. Where the Scrum Master can really help is by pointing out these impediments to the team, ensuring the team understand that there are things that perhaps could be improved. And as you say, pointing out these elephants in the room, the things the team don't want to perhaps confront head on. It's easier not to. They prefer not to have to tackle that problem right now. I think the responsibility stops with the Scrum Master for that. Their job is to ask the sometimes more tricky questions.
I think we want our teams to self-organize and to take responsibility as much as possible, but where they're not ready, where they're not able, where they're not quite up to speed yet, ultimately it's a Scrum Master's responsibility to step in and facilitate the team understanding maybe what the problems are, the questions they should be asking themselves.
Facilitate's a great word in that context, I think. Facilitate meaning a vague word, which means just to make easier, to make stuff easier. The Scrum Master's role, they're accountable for making stuff easier for the team, whatever that kind of happens to be. So the development team have been working along in their sprint and they've achieved the sprint goal early. Who's responsible for deciding what they do next, how they fill that time?
Yeah, a lot of development teams will then just decide that they've got the responsibility to bring more work in because they've already accomplished the sprint goal. But really, they should be collaborating with the product owner again, because the product owner is responsible for deciding where the value is. So it doesn't matter whether they've overcommitted or undercommitted. If they want to change the scope of the sprint, the development team really need to collaborate with the product owner because ultimately he's got responsibility on what the team should be working on.
And there's a big responsibility there for the product owner to not cram more work into the sprint, to not keep continuously pushing the dev team to exceed their sustainable pace. So you're right that it is a collaboration between these two. It's a discussion.
Yeah, the product owner can be seen as a value maximizer. And therefore, naturally, he is probably going to be pushing the team to try and cram more and more into the sprint. And it's their responsibility to push back and say, well, this is what we can realistically do to our agreed level of quality.
But there's a real balance there between not simply dishing out work and allowing the team time to breathe.
Who's responsible for the team being functional and performing well?
The success of a Scrum Master is measured by the success of their team because they're a servant leader. So the overall success of the team, if they're not performing, that's the accountability of the Scrum Master. We're supposed to be helping these guys to understand how to do their work better. If they're not understanding how to do their work better, the Scrum Master is going to be accountable for that. What do you think?
You can ask this question in different ways and it makes it different shades of grey. If we're talking about the team being performant, as you said, absolutely, that's the Scrum Master's responsibility. If we're talking about dysfunctions within the team or team health, then it starts to get into a bit of a gray area. Because the Scrum Master isn't a personal coach. They're not responsible for every individual in the team being happy. They're just responsible for making sure that that team can do their job.
Okay, Duncan, let's wrap this up. In summary, the 3 Scrum roles. Who's responsible for what?
The product owner is responsible for what is being worked on. The development team are responsible for getting that work done, and the Scrum Master is responsible for how that is done within the boundaries of the Scrum framework. And to make that work in the real world, sometimes those roles have to collaborate to get the job done.
Scrum Chat.
It drives team to... So Scrum... Fucking hell.
That question's not on my list, Duncan.
No, sorry, it's on my list, isn't it? Okay. But that they are... Oh, bloody hell.
Do you even know this?